Hello, people, and how do you do? 20 people here, although not everybody's talking, I know. I'm curious. Wow, Brian did it. Brian did the roll call. Look at him. There's Hank, there's John, there's Roger, there's Chuck, there's Rob. Paul, I believe, is Starfleet on call. Oh, Roger's down there doing it again. What? Okay, everybody I just named. Oh, John in spirit. That's funny. All right, I'm starting over because Roger started over. There's Hank, there's John, there's Brian, there's Roger, who's handling roll call today. Chuck, Rob, Paul, Eugene, Gary, I want to say, is GT Mako. I'm not 100% certain. Donna, Deborah, Sloth Bear, whose name escapes me. Maybe Tim? I'm not sure. Andrew, Webb, Ryan, Media Cafe Brian, and Paul. Paul. Hi, everybody. How's it going? I hope you're doing well. I am doing the same. Which doesn't really tell you how I'm doing. You want to do a show? Why don't we do a show? I've set the old recorder recording. Everything looks a little laggy, but there's nothing I can do about that. All systems are go, all lights are green. Let's land this puppy and then blow it up. What do you say? Nobody's default but Siri's, and standing in line for nothing. It's Thursday, the 4th of March, 2021, and this is macOS Can Live. Hey, y'all. How's it going? I'm Ken Ray, welcoming you into this Thursday afternoon edition of macOS Can Live, this thing that happens most weekdays, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, other times, other places. You know, we get together and we chat, we chew the fat, we chat. A couple of topics for you today. Second half of the show, and I'm glad that this is only the second part of the show because initially I thought it was all we were going to talk about, but it seemed like kind of a bummer. Have you heard the whole thing about people standing in line and not getting paid for it at Apple stores? I don't mean standing in line for phones. I mean people who work at Apple stores trying to leave. They got to get their bags checked. And somewhere in there, that's time that I guess somebody thinks doesn't cost anybody anything. Except now it's coming back around that it does. We'll talk more about that story in the second part of the show. First part of the show, though, it's an object lesson, and yet one that I'm really excited about. So a lot of times on macOS Ken, and if you found this show, by the way, without knowing what macOS Ken is, that's a daily Apple News and news related to Apple News show that I've been doing since, since Hector was a pup. 2006 is when that started, so 15 years at this point. And a lot of times when we get word of stuff coming out in beta form in software, so like iOS 14.5 has this feature in beta, and everybody gets excited and they say, you're going to be able to do this thing in iOS 14.5. I will sometimes be a tiny bit pedantic and say, assuming that that feature gets out of beta. Because sometimes things turn up in beta that end up, not actually coming out when the software is released. Other times we might be mistaken about what is coming up in the beta. And that gives you an idea of what is coming up right now. Initial reports around iOS 14.5. This is from Ars Technica, although they reference TechCrunch a lot in this article. Initial reports in iOS 14 said that you were going to be able to tell Apple's virtual assistant what you wanted the default music player to be when iOS 14.5 comes out. So you would say, ma'am or sir, Siri. I don't want to activate everybody's Apple virtual assistant. You would say to it, I want Spotify to be my default music player, or I want Tidal. I'm kidding. I want Spotify to be my default music player. And from then on, Apple's virtual assistant would know when you say, hey, play Best Friend's Girl by the Cars. It wouldn't say, what do you want me to play it from? You wouldn't have to say, I want you to play it from Amazon Music, or I want you to play it from Deezer. You would just say, play it, and it would go to the thing that you had set as the default. And there was much rejoicing until today, when it turns out that's not exactly what was going on. Users said that they were prompted to select a preferred music app such as Spotify or Apple Music when they were using the early betas. They then found that Siri seemed to honor that choice on future requests. But Apple has told TechCrunch that that's not exactly what's happening. It's not going to default to iOS to another player in iOS 14.5. Rather, the behavior that people were seeing is a question that Siri may periodically ask in order to intelligently pick apps on your behalf based on the nature of the content that you're asking for. Among other things, this means that Apple's virtual assistant might serve you a different app when you ask for a podcast than it might when you request a pop song. But in any case, it's not a default app selection per se, and Siri could decide to pick an app based on any number of factors beyond that. Siri may also ask you which app to use again periodically to further clarify or refine its choices. All right. To me, this is exciting. And I know that might seem crazy, but to me, this is exciting. We talked months ago on this show, and it's weird that this show has now been going long enough that I could say we talked about it months ago. But months ago, there was some story about Apple hiring people in search. And some people said, well, that means Apple's going to challenge Google. Apple's going to have a search engine of its own. And won't that be exciting because it won't track us? And Apple's actual reason for hiring all those people, according to Apple, was they were trying to improve Siri search. And I said, when we read that, that sounds awesome. Because if I can make it instead of me asking Siri a question and it shooting something to my email or to my phone, rather, if I can make it so that I can just ask it a question and it can just answer my question, it becomes my default rather than Google being where I go for search or DuckDuckGo being where I go for search, or rather than asking Jeeves, I just speak into the air and say, hey, you, what's the answer to this question? Now, that might seem kind of far fetched, but I did it the other day. I can't remember what it was, but I asked Siri a question. There were three of us in the kitchen, family. There were three of us in the kitchen, and I asked Siri a question, and I honestly expected it to come back with, I don't know, or I've sent an answer to your iPhone. And instead, it gave me about a paragraph's worth of answer. And then it said if I wanted more information to tell it, and it would give me more information. And the problem is I've gone to everybody in the house that was there when that happened, and none of us remember what the actual question was. But I do remember at the time, the two grown-ups in the room were amazed by the amount of information that Siri gave, and then its willingness to continue giving you information. Siri is getting smarter. Siri is learning. And so it seems to me that you're not going to have to set a default manually in Siri. The fourth or fifth time I say, hey, play Don't Let Start on Spotify, after a while, it's going to come to a place and go, right, he likes to play music on Spotify. So I'm just going to play it on Spotify. I'm not going to ask. He doesn't have to say. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. This, it seems to me, is part of Siri learning. Makes Siri smarter. It makes Siri more intuitive. It makes the whole thing more natural. Because if it's smart enough to figure all that stuff out, that you know that it's learning. It's like the thing I talked about. And what's weird is, even though it's not Siri necessarily, it sort of all feels like that to me. I've told the story here several times, and this was several years ago now, and this is how smart this was. I got in the habit of going to the same restaurant every Friday night, and the fourth time I did that, the fourth Friday in a row, when I did that, I got in my car, put my phone in a little mount, and it told me how long it was going to take to get to the place that I go every Friday night, or that I went every Friday night at the time. I go grocery shopping the same day every week, and I go to 2 stores because there's some stuff at one store that I can't get at the other. And my phone, which I'm tying into Siri at this point, I'm not, because I don't ask it, but the machine learning or the system learning or the artificial intelligence or whatever you want to refer to it as, Apple's all-encompassing ness When I get in the car on the day that I go grocery shopping, it tells me how long it's gonna take to get to my grocery store, and when I get in the car at that grocery store, it doesn't tell me how long it's gonna take to get home, it tells me how long it's gonna get to the next grocery store, because that's what I do. After that one, I go to the other, and it's smart enough to know that now. Now, the one thing I think everybody thought this whole I can set a different music player by default thing was gonna do was stave off, EU concerns, where Spotify is has complained to the EU. EU has taken that into consideration, and according to headlines that I've seen, I haven't read the stories yet today, but according to headlines that I've seen, the EU is getting ready to level charges against Apple for preferring or placing or giving prominence to its music player above any other music players. I think everybody thought, well, being able to set that by default is, going to sort of allay some of those concerns by the EU. Wouldn't allay Spotify's concerns, but I don't think anything would do that anyway. But it would allay some of the regulatory concerns. And not only is Apple not doing that, they've come out point blank and said, yeah, that's not what we're doing. Not addressing the regulatory concerns, just saying, no, we're not doing that. What we're doing is we're making Siri smarter. The new way Apple says Siri will handle music streaming services may actually be service agnostic in terms of how it will pick services to respond to user requests based on past user behavior, according to Ars Technica. But as is the case with many of these AI assistant features, it's not likely to be all that clear to users exactly how Siri will make its judgments. What do I care? Siri becomes my default. Apple becomes my default. And I don't just mean when I buy a computer. I mean, I speak into the air and I trust that whatever machine learning, whatever thing that Apple and Siri are getting together to do, combined with the stuff that I've asked it to do in the past, it's figuring out what it is I want to do and, handing that to me without me having to kludge around with going into something and changing a default. And that's impressive. Should Apple make it so you can set Spotify as the default? Should. It seems like it would be easy. I don't know why they wouldn't, but if Siri is gonna figure that out on its own in the next month or so and quit asking me and go ahead and default to it anyway, if it can actually just pick up what I want it to do based on what I tell it to do rather than my having to go in and change something, that's impressive. Won't be enough for the EU. I know that's true. Won't be enough for the EU, but that's fine because, that fight's coming anyway. Speaking of should, we'll talk in just a moment about standing in line for nothing. But first, I want to let you know tomorrow is the end of the week, both, for this show, for Mac OS Ken, and for In a Few Minutes. And for In a Few Minutes, you know what that means? Somebody's spinning the wheel of stuff. It happens to be the person who's been on the show all week. Parallel host Shelley Brisbane will be on talking about her favorite comedian, the scariest thing she ever did, whether she prefers DC or Marvel, and why. I'm coming back around to liking Wheel of Stuff, and pardon the around thing. That wasn't. Yeah, I thought I was done with it, and then people said no, I would miss it, and so it's sticking around for a while. Next player up, it's her second time at the wheel, Shelley Brisbane, on tomorrow's edition. That's if you don't know what that is, the best way to find out is to find out. You can either listen to episodes here on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/KenRay. That would be just as helpful as subscribing, or heck, do both. Wherever you find podcasts, just search for. Probably the best thing to do is search for Ken Ray, and that'll have shows that I've guested on, old shows that are still out there, and then current shows now. One of them is In a Few Minutes, and it would be great if you would subscribe. So how many times is this story going to be a story? Started back in 2013. 2013, a bunch of Apple employees said, right, we're trying to leave work. Apple is making us stay in line so they can check our bags and satchels to make sure we're not stealing stuff. Apparently also checking their devices to make sure they're not, appropriating IP or maybe swiping pictures off of customer devices. I don't know what they were doing searching people's phones, although I can understand reasons for it. But here's the thing, there's lots of Apple employees, there were a few people who were equipped to check, and apparently what was happening is you had to clock out, and then you had to have your bag checked before, you could walk out the door, which is fine if you're the first person in line, because 'cause you're waiting like 3 minutes. If you're the last person in line, who knows how long you're waiting? But apparently it was long enough that people said, "You know what? I'm kind of feeling cheesed here, a little bit hosed." So they got together and they sued back in 2013, saying, "We would like to be compensated for this time that we're not allowed to go out and do what we want." That case was dismissed in 2014, though a class action suit was allowed to go forward. That was dismissed in 2015, with the judge at that point saying, if they don't want to stand around and wait for their stuff to be checked, they shouldn't bring stuff to work. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Anyway, they went ahead and appealed, and that went to the Supreme Court, the California Supreme Court, because this all happens in California, where things like this happen. They went to the California Supreme Court, which determined that employees were and are in Apple's control during mandatory exit searches of bags, packages, devices, and other items. State law requires companies to compensate employees for time spent on anti theft programs. A later decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit revived the class action suit as it stands. This, by the way, is all according to Apple Insider. Although some of what I just told you about, I just remember because this story has always honestly gotten my dander up. It's gotten my ire. Got my goat. Not my greatest of all time. My goat. Anyway, now the whole thing's back to the guy who dismissed it at least one of the times, maybe two. And he's apparently willing to go along with the 12,000 plus employees who sued, who say, we're owed money. And so Apple said, all right, well, I guess we owe them money. Tell you what, have all 12,000 plus of these people fill in the days that they were required to stand in line and for how long they were required to stand in line. And then we can talk about what they're owed. Pardon me for saying so, but boo. Are you kidding me with that? Are you kidding me with that? It's fine. It's not going to happen because the judge said that's not going to happen. The judge in the case, Judge William Alsup, said, "Yeah, you're basically making them lie." That's not exactly what he said. He said they would not be telling the truth. I'm not going to require the claimants to figure out every day that they stood in line and how long they stood in line. If they gave dates, they would not be telling the truth. Apple is just out of luck on that point, so said Judge Alsup. So instead, what he's going to do is he's going to hold mini trials. And I don't know who's going to speak for whom in those trials. Apparently, Apple is still going to be able to argue against certain people. And I don't understand any of this at this point because their time is worth something. And I understand your stuff is worth something too. And nobody is saying, well, I would imagine there are some people who would say, but let's, for the sake of not argument, nobody is saying that Apple should not be allowed to check somebody's bag or satchel before they leave. But if you're going to take 45 minutes to do that, and I understand they could have been first in line, but somebody's always going to have to be last in line. And if it's going to take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 25 minutes before you get to them, that's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 25 minutes for which they're not being compensated. Now, maybe they were just going to go and get high with their friends afterwards, and that's fine. You can wait 25 minutes for that. Maybe they had to get home because their mom is watching their kid. Maybe they have to get home quickly because they have to pay the babysitter. And that babysitter, by the way, is going to be compensated for that time that that person's not being compensated. I haven't worked an hourly job in a long time, one that I was paid by the hour, but I remember working hourly jobs. And I was not in the habit of screwing my employer. And some people are, and maybe that's what Apple is trying to fight against here. And maybe that's why, the lawyers who are working for Apple on this are saying, fine, let's talk about some of these bad apples. Pardon my use of that term. That was a complete accident. There's a lot about this thing that just sort of tone deaf is a word that we use or a term that we use a little too much, but there's a lot about this that's tone deaf. When the judge in the case said in 2015, if they don't want their bags searched, they shouldn't bring bags to work. I'm guessing he is a guy who has either never had an hourly job or has forgotten what that was like. I used to leave my apartment when I was in school. I used to leave my apartment around 8 o'clock in the morning to get to school by 9 o'clock. I would then do my day at school, classes and whatever. And then I would go from there to my job, which was in a different part of town. So that's like another 30 or 40-minute train ride. And I'd get there and then I'd work my shift. And then it would be somewhere between 14 and 18 hours before I got home. Was I not supposed to bring anything with me? And I understand that's not everybody's story, but that is somebody's story. Put a different way, are they allowed to clock in from home and get paid for that time? You'd say no, because they're not there working. Okay, well, they're there working. And if you're making it difficult for them to leave, you got to pay. The thing that I find really annoying is we're talking about $60 million, which is a lot of money, but not for Apple. We're talking about $60 million, and the state of California has said, listen, you owe people money for this. And this judge is like, yeah, well, I can't argue because the Supreme Court says it. There are other cases that say it. So why don't we just settle on an amount and you pay them instead of trying to take it down to a case by case by case by case basis? That's ugly. It's just incredibly ugly, and they can afford it. And I'm not saying that means they just need to give away all the money, but look, the case has been argued, the case has been decided. Fighting individuals at this point is just, it seems bad. I had this other crazy idea. See what you think. I understand there's probably like a room in the back where they have to, clock out or something. What if the person or people who are checking their bags had some sort of, I don't know, some sort of technological solution maybe where like they have a thing that they could scan on your phone as you're leaving after they've checked your bag, and that's how you clock out, right? Because then you don't have to worry about, oh, somebody was only here for 5 minutes, but I'm paying them for 30, and somebody was here for 30 minutes and I'm only paying them for 5. I mean, then you actually know how long somebody was there and when they're leaving. I mean, I know that's it's sort of a technological thing, but I feel like somebody in Cupertino might be able to swing that. And if somebody's always at the back of the line, somebody's always going to have to be at the back of the line. If somebody is always at the back of the line, chances are they need the $3 for leaving however many minutes later more than they need to be someplace else. And is that where you want to stand? You want to stand against them like needing the $5 that they get for being in the back of the line more than being out? Dude, if I could get out of work and I didn't need the money, nothing would keep me there longer than a minute. I'm talking about back when I did the hourly jobs. I didn't pad my time my time card. I don't think most people do. I think most people want to get out of there as soon as they can. And if you're not going to let them, you probably need to pay. Curious what your thoughts are on any of this stuff. I'm always curious what people think about the stuff that we talk about here. There's really one good way to let me know. I mean, there are two. You can leave a comment on this video, and that would be fine. What would be really great, though, is if you would send me an email. Info@macosken.com is the way to do that. INFO, info@macosken.com. Do you agree with my stance on standing in line? Do you think I'm full of beans? Are you excited about this whole Siri thing? I get so excited about what's coming for Siri. I, for one, welcome my invisible robot overlord. Info@macosken.com if you want to agree or disagree or just say, hey, Let's see. We got macOS Ken tomorrow. We've got in a few minutes tomorrow. We got macOS Ken live again tomorrow afternoon. And I will talk to you soon. I accidentally stuck in my tongue. Hey, John McKee's here. Oh, John. I was going to say, did they give you a sticker for getting your shot? But of course, they give you a Band-Aid. And then I thought it should be like when you vote, like, I voted. And then the problem, and forgive me, this is going to be a tiny bit crass, and I apologize, but they should be a sticker that's like, something about getting pricked. Seems like it's a thing, maybe. I don't know. I'm glad you're here, John. I'm going to come back to the bottom part of the thing and find out how your shot went. Did you also get your cootie shot while you were there, by the way? Because it seems like, as long as you're there, unless there's counter interaction between the COVID vaccine and the circle, dot. It's going to be fun when we can start making light of all of this, like really start making light of all this, isn't it? We're not far, I think. Oh, okay. John's there in spirit. See, I missed that earlier. Props, by the way, John. Roger did an excellent job of doing roll call. Both, was it Roger or Brian? Hold on. Both Roger and Brian did roll call. So they had your back and mine. John says he likes Eugene's idea. I miss what Eugene's idea was. Let me go back up. We could just all shout here all at once. Okay, that's not a bad idea. All right, here we go to the actual show part of the show. S lady, yes, I know. Everybody says that. Hey, Slady. I don't think I wish it would let us change the name, honestly. Eugene says, how about calling Siri by the name Ava for Apple Virtual Assistant? If you mean in like these kinds of conversations, maybe. I really wish it would let me change the name. I'd like to call it Friday or Jarvis or Ultron or Vision. I imagine someday we might get there. But then again, I would have thought that Apple would let us design our own watch faces by now, and they haven't done that, so who can say? That's funny. I'm sorry, Media Cafe Online. I always space on the name. Eventually, Siri will know us so well that we, meaning each of us and Siri individually, will be like an old married couple. I think that's probably true. I wonder every now and then, honestly, about operating systems and artificial intelligences as friends. I think we talked about that here because in the after discussion one time, somebody brought up Her, the movie Her, which, ends poorly because the AI actually ends up leaving everybody, but open them up to new. Roger says, I suppose regulators will never realize that choosing iPhone is a choice. Right? I keep coming in here. There are all kinds of phones I could choose. There are many operating systems, that's true, but there are all kinds of phones I could choose. Part of the reason I come here is because I like the iPhone, and part of the reason I come here is because I like the ecosystem. And if I don't, I can go elsewhere or pitch the whole thing in the river. Boo. See, that's wrong, Roger, and I'm glad they're defunct. I'm not really glad they're defunct because people lost jobs. Years ago, when I worked at a now defunct amusement park. What defunct amusement park? Hold on, because I worked at a defunct amusement park. Years ago, when I worked at a now defunct amusement park, we had to change into and out of costume and get and turn in our register till off the clock. We were only on the clock when we got to our shop. That's crap. Especially because, yeah, that's totally bogus. I'll tell you another one that I can't stand, is when you go to a place, and I try not to be the guy who's, like, showing up right when you're closing, but when you go to a place that's open until 10:30, and, this is obviously the before times. You go to a place that's open till 10:30 and you get there and it's like 10:20 and they don't have any of the stuff that they're supposed to have because they close at 10:30. And I realize reading through these stories, the reason they close at 10:30 is because they're not paying people to clean after 10:30. 10:30 is when they close, which means 10:30 is when they're done, which is a horrible customer experience, which comes to mean something. Anyway, that's bogus. See, Brian says he had the same thing. I think it's a fairly common thing, but I think it shouldn't be. Hey, John McKee's here. I've gotten to that part of the discussion. Hank says from his limited time at Apple, Steve was still in charge then. This is a level of sickishness I observed. Not a good look. Yeah, it's not. It's not a good look, and it's no way to be. Do we know the name of that lawsuit? I apologize, John. I don't have it off the top of my head. If you go, and I hate to send you on a goose chase, but if you go to macosken.com, you will find a link to the story, which is then replete with other links. So I'm sure you could find it. I don't remember it off the top of my head. And I could sit here and look for it, but then it's just you watching me surf the web. So that doesn't sound like fun at all. Deborah, you ask an interesting question, and I can try to find out. Deborah wants to know how Apple handles bag checks now. Have they changed how they do it? I have a friend who works at an Apple store in California. If I had thought about it, I would have asked him before the show started, but I will ask him and see what he says. See, I think it's getting better, Roger. Roger says that Apple's virtual assistant frustrates him so much he rarely uses it. I say try again. I say try again and keep trying, for stuff that's not mission critical. I think you'll be surprised. It's gotten a lot better, surprisingly so. Is that true? John got a sticker, a pin, a Band-Aid, a card that says he got the second shot. I didn't get cookies, though. That's a screw job. Oh, sure. I got life-saving, medicine and a card proving it and a pin, but no snack. Donna's getting her second shot on March 16th. Wow. Right between the Ides of March and St. Patrick's Day. It's good that you're not getting it on the 15th because nobody wants to be stabbed with anything on the 15th. Not sure which lawsuit you're talking about, John. John says somebody that he knows was part of that lawsuit, never tried to get added to the class, but just got a sizable check anyway. Do you mean for the retail thing, John, or something else? The quickening. Yeah, I understand that. We were talking about changing the name of Apple's virtual assistant earlier, and Eugene points out that that's a brand, and Apple wants people saying that brand out loud all the time, which I get. Astro World. I worked at Opryland. Rogers' defunct, now defunct amusement park is Astro World. For all your Astro needs, I worked at Opryland, and they didn't tell us they were closing it either. Gaylord Entertainment or Gaylord whatever. It's a conglomerate that runs out of Oklahoma City. They owned and built Opryland and the Grand Ole Opry. And then after it closed one winter, they were like, yeah, by the way, we're not opening again. And they tore the whole thing down and built a mall called Opry Mills. Nobody needs to know that, but I thought I'd tell you anyway. Defunct Amusement Park is that's the one that was on Scooby Doo. You're right. Actually, isn't Defunct Amusement Park the one that Banksy built? It's horrible though, isn't it? The quickening. The idea that they're not paying people after closing time really helps me. I've always been miffed when they can't take my money or whatever 10 minutes before closing. It makes sense now, right? Now I don't think that's true of every place because I know that if you go to Borders, well, if you go to Borders, you've got a time machine. If you go to Barnes and Noble, they keep saying, right, we're closing in 10 minutes. We're closing in 5 minutes. Okay, we're closed now. Please take your stuff to the front. Of course, they're still making sales, right? It's not just people sitting around drinking the same cup of coffee they've had for 5 hours and scamming on your free Wi-Fi. Huh. Interesting. I'm not going to say that name either, but apparently Amazon's virtual assistant has killed naming people that. John found the name of the lawsuit, everybody, so stand down. Interesting. Media Cafe says Siri seems to work better on the HomePod Mini than on the iPhone. Are you using it more for the HomePod Mini just because it's novel? I've been impressed lately across the board. Oh, that's a bummer. Rob says that a lot of the issue with asking Siri to do things around the house is problems with HomeKit, unable to communicate with devices. Web, I forgot about that. Samsung uses the name Bixby. See, I'll say that openly because I feel fairly certain that nobody listening to this has a Samsung device that's going to be woken up by that. Not saying there are no Samsung devices. I'm just saying, yeah. Wow, it's interesting, John, that you know somebody who got paid on the bag check suit. It's really interesting. Hey, Gary went to Opryland. I may have sold you a hat or taken money from you to play a game you were never going to win. Astro World is still an empty lot. That's sad. Although it's funny because Disney World had a water park that they closed. They have another water park still, but Disney World had a water park that they closed, and occasionally some photographer will sneak onto it and take pictures of the desolation, which is still right on the Disney property. Kind of weird. Media Cafe is happy with Siri on all his devices. So cool. River Country. Is that the one? Is that what it was? Okay. Wow. You mean sunburned? There's one that they have where you could go snorkeling, and I love that. That was the most at ease I've ever been snorkeling. Last time I went real snorkeling was down in San Diego a few years ago. And the whole thing was, hey, come swim with tiger sharks, which are tiny and small and stay away from you. And yet, all of a sudden, I was like, well, I'm swimming with sharks. I don't like it so much. And then all I could hear was my breathing. And so my breathing started going faster and faster. And then I swam like right into a jellyfish, like a tiny, like a really small, or no, I saw it. That's what it was. I saw a jellyfish and I was like about to swim into it. And I was like, I'm gonna go to the beach. But snorkeling at the little Disney thing was great because nothing was gonna kill you. The snorkeling was the best memory, says John McKee. See, for me too. There you go. All right, guys and gals, thanks for spending this part of the afternoon with me. I gotta go. Gotta go give Trader Joe's some money. But let's do it again tomorrow if you want to. John, I'm glad it went well. And good for you. All right, everybody else, have a wonderful afternoon. Have a wonderful evening. And we'll talk tomorrow. Take care.